Tonight we drift into a world where glowing powders, bubbling cauldrons, and glittering metals promise to cheat death itself. Imagine holding a cup, not of water or tea, but of liquid gold, gleaming in the lamplight, shimmering like a promise your body can't possibly keep. Ancient Chinese alchemists once believed you could drink gold and live forever. Sounds exciting, right? Except, you probably won't survive this taste test. Spoiler: death came faster than forever for more than a few emperors who tried. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle into the candlelit workshop of an ancient alchemist. Clay jars line the walls, each scrawled with mysterious brushstrokes: cinnabar, jade powder, mercury. At the center sits a bronze cauldron, heated by a glowing bed of coals. The air is thick with metallic fumes, a smell halfway between fireworks and a wet coin pressed to your tongue. The alchemist peers into the cauldron as if it holds the answer to every problem in life, from wrinkles to mortality itself. To understand why gold ended up in these dangerous soups, you have to step into the worldview of early Chinese thought. For Daoist seekers, the natural world wasn't just dirt and rocks, it was alive, pulsing with qi, the cosmic breath that flows through all things. If qi could be cultivated, balanced, and perfected, maybe the body could too. Maybe death was just a bad habit that could be broken with the right recipe. One mainstream fact here: records from the Han Dynasty show that emperors really did employ alchemists to mix these bizarre brews, hoping to dodge the grave. They weren't treating this as a metaphor, they wanted literal, physical immortality. And yes, some emperors drank these concoctions, and yes, some of them didn't exactly get the outcome they wanted. Imagine being the court alchemist. Your boss is asking for a potion to make him live forever, and the penalty for failure is probably a little more immediate than old age. Talk about job stress. And here's a quirky tidbit: some recipes called for melted gold mixed with honey, creating a sticky paste that was rolled into little pills. The idea was that, since gold never tarnished or rusted, swallowing it would make your organs shine with the same everlasting purity. Of course, your digestive system would strongly disagree, but logic wasn't the point. Historians still argue whether the alchemists truly believed their elixirs worked, or if they were simply keeping emperors entertained and themselves alive by performing chemistry theater. After all, if you can make glowing fumes rise from a cauldron, you look like a wizard even if your potion is poison. You stand in the smoky chamber, hearing the bubbling sound of heated mercury, a substance that today we know you should never inhale, let alone sip with dinner. But in that time, it was mesmerizing, liquid metal that seemed alive, able to swallow and release other substances like a hungry spirit. Mixed with powdered gold, it shimmered like a captured piece of sunlight. The alchemist turns to you, his robe stained with streaks of red cinnabar dust. He holds up a ladle, golden droplets trembling at the edge. He smiles knowingly, as though he's about to share the secret to never dying. And you, curious but cautious, lean forward only to remember that cheeky warning: you probably won't survive this. Maybe immortality isn't worth the stomachache. As the fumes curl upward, you hear echoes of court officials whispering in the palace halls. The emperor grows restless. He demands results. You realize this glittering brew isn't just a science experiment. It's politics, philosophy, and survival wrapped into one. Gold could mean power, both literal and symbolic. To drink it wasn't just to chase eternal youth, it was to show dominance over nature itself. You step back from the cauldron, letting the warmth brush your face like a fire on a cold night. The workshop fades into shadows, and the story continues, gliding deeper into the roots of Daoist alchemy and the strange obsession with bending nature to the will of mortals. You wander deeper into the dim corridors of history, the smoky cauldron room fading behind you. What lingers is the question: How could anyone look at a shiny yellow rock and think, yes, that belongs in my stomach? To get there, you need to step into the strange, flexible world of Daoist philosophy. Taoism, at its heart, is about flowing with the natural order. You picture a river carving through mountains, water yielding but also undefeated. Daoist sages said life should imitate that river, not rigid and brittle, but soft, adaptable, eternal in its movement. If rivers could carve stone, maybe human beings could carve out a way around death. And so the idea of alchemy, taking materials from the world, reshaping them into essences, and consuming them, fit like a puzzle piece into this worldview. One mainstream fact: Daoist texts from as early as the 4th century BCE describe nourishing life practices. These included breathing techniques, dietary rules, meditations, and, eventually, recipes for elixirs. The goal wasn't always immortality in the sci-fi sense, sometimes it was just longevity, vibrant health, the ability to age like a peach tree that keeps blooming season after season. Still, the ambition stretched higher and higher until some thinkers dared to whisper, "Why not live forever?" Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Daoist alchemists believed that by eating pine nuts for 100 days straight, you could stop needing food entirely. Pine nuts, they argued, were so close to the essence of heaven and earth that your body would simply run on qi after digesting them long enough. Modern nutritionists might raise an eyebrow at that meal plan, but it shows how nature's symbols were treated as literal keys to transformation. As you stroll through a Daoist temple courtyard in your mind, you imagine the sound of bamboo leaves rustling, the smell of incense drifting past. Alchemy wasn't just chemistry in a cauldron, it was part of an entire ecosystem of rituals, meditations, and poetic metaphors. The Tao wasn't a substance you could bottle, it was the cosmic rhythm itself. Drinking gold, then, wasn't only about swallowing metal. It was about consuming what looked eternal, what reflected the sun and never corroded, as if sipping the very spirit of the cosmos. Historians still argue whether the outer alchemy of swallowing substances was ever meant to be taken as seriously as the inner alchemy of meditation. Some say the dangerous experiments with mercury and gold were just one path among many. Others insist that plenty of people truly thought they were brewing liquid immortality. The debate continues because the surviving texts weave metaphor and recipe together so tightly you can't always tell if drink gold means take this pill or meditate on the eternal light in your chest. But you imagine the draw. Taoism often painted immortals as glowing beings who drifted into the clouds, sipping dew drops, dancing across mountains, never aging a day. If you lived in a time of disease, famine, and short lifespans, wouldn't you want that ticket out too? It's not so different from today's billionaires buying fancy vitamins and cryogenic freezers. Humans don't change much, we just upgrade the packaging. As you sit cross-legged beside a Daoist sage under a pine tree, you hear him speak softly about yin and yang, the balance of opposites. Gold, in his mind, belongs to yang, bright, solar, indestructible. To balance your fragile yin body, you need a bit of that everlasting yang. So, melt it, drink it, and maybe your organs shine with the sun's permanence. The logic feels dreamlike, almost hypnotic, the kind of reasoning that makes sense in candlelight at midnight but unravels under fluorescent lab bulbs. The sage smiles at you with that maddening Daoist grin, the kind that says, you already know the answer, but you're too noisy to hear it. You can't tell if he's serious or if he's playing the eternal Daoist trick, confusing you into enlightenment. And somewhere in the distance, faintly, the echo of a bubbling cauldron reminds you that for some, philosophy was never enough. They wanted the elixir, the potion, the proof in the cup. So, while Taoism provided the philosophy, the workshops of alchemists turned that philosophy into glittering, sometimes deadly, drinks. The courtyard fades, the incense smoke curls, and you drift toward the clanging of bronze vessels, where elixirs are about to boil into existence. You step into a workshop that feels half kitchen, half battlefield. Bronze cauldrons line the walls, each perched over glowing coals. Thick smoke curls upward, filling the rafters with a haze that smells of metal shavings and wet stone. You lean closer, curious, and hear the hiss of liquids meeting powders like soda fizzing, but far less friendly. This is where Daoist dreams turn into dangerous recipes, the bubbling elixirs of outer alchemy. One mainstream fact here: early Chinese alchemists experimented with substances like cinnabar, a bright red form of mercury sulfide, real mercury, sulfur, and sometimes actual flakes of gold. These weren't random picks, they believed such materials contained concentrated cosmic essences. Cinnabar glowed with fiery energy, mercury flowed like living silver, and gold resisted rust. Put together, these ingredients seemed like puzzle pieces of eternity. And here's a quirky tidbit: some instructions told the alchemist to stir the mixture with a jade rod rather than a wooden spoon, because jade was thought to repel evil spirits and prevent the elixir from spoiling. Imagine going through all the trouble to melt metal and then worrying your wooden spoon might ruin the vibe. Kitchen nightmares, but make it mystical. You stand by one cauldron as the alchemist sprinkles powdered cinnabar into the pot. The red dust swirls, the surface bubbles, and a vapor rises that catches the torchlight in shimmering waves. You cover your nose, instinctively aware that breathing this in might not be the healthiest bedtime choice. But for the alchemist, the fumes are proof of transformation, base matter turning into something extraordinary. Historians still argue whether these workshops were more symbolic theater than serious science. Did the alchemists truly believe they were brewing drinkable gold, or were they staging an elaborate ritual for emperors who demanded miracles? Some scholars suggest the recipes were coded allegories for meditation, never meant to be swallowed. Yet tomb records and court annals clearly describe people actually drinking these glowing liquids, with often disastrous results. You picture the scene: a servant carefully ladles the hot brew into small ceramic cups. The steam curls upward, glowing faintly red. Courtiers lean in, whispering, some hopeful, some terrified. The emperor watches with eyes hungry for power, eager to sip eternity. Everyone in the room knows this could be salvation or catastrophe. But no one dares say no when the ruler lifts the cup. The process itself was ritualized. Some texts instructed that cauldrons be placed at specific compass points, aligned with cosmic forces. Others demanded months of preparation, including fasting, bathing, or chanting spells to purify the ingredients. You might smile at the detail: boil mercury at the right phase of the moon, stir gold powder in only after reciting a hymn, and voila, immortality soup. It sounds absurd, but it shows how tightly these recipes were woven into cosmic order, not just kitchen experiments. And here comes your second joke of the night: if modern cooking shows had segments like how to make a death-defying gold smoothie, ratings would skyrocket, but the Food Network would probably get sued within minutes. The alchemist now pours a shimmering liquid into a glassy vial. The surface catches light like a miniature sun trapped in a bottle. You imagine holding it, warm against your palm, wondering if it contains salvation or poison. To the ancient mind, those two things often looked suspiciously alike. The workshop is noisy, crackling flames, bubbling pots, the scratch of charcoal pens writing recipes on bamboo slips. But beneath the noise hums a spiritual certainty: the cosmos is made of essences, and if you combine them correctly, you can rewrite destiny. Whether or not it worked, the faith was intoxicating. One more joke slips in, soft as a wink: if you've ever ruined a pot of soup by adding too much salt, imagine the stress of ruining an emperor's immortality potion. Talk about a recipe you really don't want to mess up. The cauldron glows hotter, shadows flicker against the walls, and you sense the weight of centuries pressing in. These bronze vessels aren't just cooking tools, they're symbols of state power, ritual purity, and human ambition. They hiss and spit, daring you to sip from their depths. And as you watch, You realize the scene can't be frozen in this smoky chamber forever. The next step is inevitable, the emperor himself demanding a taste of liquid gold. You drift into a grand palace hall where jade columns gleam under torchlight, and silk banners ripple softly in the night air. Beyond the marble steps, a throne rises, and upon it sits an emperor, restless and unsmiling. His eyes, sharp as daggers, fix on the trembling alchemist kneeling before him. The court holds its breath, because everyone knows what's at stake, the promise of immortality poured into a cup. One mainstream fact: throughout Chinese history, several emperors were obsessed with elixirs of eternal life. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the first unifier of China, famously dispatched expeditions to seek magical islands of immortals, but he also consumed alchemical brews that may have hastened his death. Centuries later, Tang dynasty rulers like Emperor Wu Xing also reportedly sipped these glittering concoctions, only to die young. The irony is thick: you chase immortality, and it kills you faster. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some records describe elixirs as being stored in tiny gold or silver bottles shaped like gourds. These were carried to the emperor on silk cushions, like fragile baby birds. Imagine waiting nervously with your boss's live forever juice, praying it doesn't spill, leak, or, explode on the way over. The alchemist rises, carrying a jade cup filled with a shimmering golden liquid. Steam curls upward, shimmering like the heat above a desert road. Courtiers bow lower, unwilling to make eye contact, because if this brew works, their emperor is about to outlive them all. If it doesn't, well, let's just say heads could roll, and not only metaphorically. Historians still argue whether emperors truly believed in the literal promise of eternal life, or if the elixirs were as much about symbolism as science. To drink gold was to display heavenly mandate, to show that the ruler's body was unlike common men, infused with cosmic essence. But whether they believed or not, many emperors demanded cup after cup, gambling with their own health in the name of power. The emperor lifts the cup. The hall is silent, broken only by the faint trickle of a water clock in the corner. He drinks. The gold gleams against his lips, and for a moment you imagine him glowing with new vitality, like a dragon swallowing the sun. The court erupts in praise, voices echoing through the hall. 10,000 years. 10,000 years. The words bounce against the jade walls, but beneath the cheer lies fear. What if this sun in a cup is poison disguised as promise? You notice something. Emperors who drank elixirs often demanded more, not because they felt healthier, but because they grew weaker. Some chroniclers described rulers trembling, coughing blood, or losing their minds after consuming mercury-laced tonics. And yet the logic went in circles. Maybe the body was just transforming, purging old weakness to make way for eternal strength. Talk about toxic optimism. Joke break. Imagine your doctor today prescribing, take 1 cup of molten metal daily, with meals. You'd sprint for a second opinion or a lawyer. But in those courts, a second opinion could cost you your head. The emperor sets down the cup, breathing heavily, his face flushed. Servants rush to fan him with peacock feathers, while the alchemist bows so low his forehead touches the stone floor. Everyone pretends the ruler looks invigorated, even if he looks more like someone who just ate a bad shrimp. Because in that moment, doubt is more dangerous than poison. But here's the haunting truth. Despite failure after failure, emperors kept demanding elixirs. The lure of immortality was too strong. In a world where dynasties rose and fell with brutal speed, what ruler wouldn't want to guarantee he'd never lose the throne? To outlive rivals wasn't just vanity, it was political strategy. And you, standing quietly at the back of the hall, realize that the obsession isn't fading, it's about to dig deeper. If the palace thirsts for golden drinks, then someone has to mine the ingredients, even if it means crawling into deadly red caves filled with shimmering dust. The emperor leans back on his throne, smug or sick, you can't quite tell. The courtiers exhale as if released from a spell, while the alchemist scurries away, already planning the next brew. The torches flicker. The room dims. And your path tilts toward the glowing mouths of cinnabar mines, where immortality begins in darkness. You descend into the earth, leaving behind the echoing palace halls and stepping into the yawning mouth of a cinnabar mine. The air is damp, heavy with mineral dust that glitters faintly in the torchlight. Each step crunches over loose rock, and the deeper you go, the stronger the metallic tang fills your throat. It's here, in these suffocating tunnels, that the dream of liquid gold is born. One mainstream fact: cinnabar, the blood-red mineral form of mercury sulfide, was the primary source of mercury in ancient China. It was prized not only for alchemy but also for creating the brilliant vermilion pigment used in lacquerware and palace walls. Entire mining regions, like those in present-day Guizhou and Hunan, were dedicated to pulling this shimmering danger out of the ground. Your quirky tidbit: cinnabar mines were sometimes described in almost mythical terms. Travelers wrote of glowing walls, dust that sparkled like crushed rubies, and strange fumes that made men dizzy and dreamlike. Some miners believed the caves were haunted by spirits guarding the treasure. To appease them, offerings were left at the mine entrance: bits of food, coins, even hair clippings. Imagine going to work and leaving part of your haircut at the door to keep the cave spirits from sabotaging your shift. You shuffle along behind a group of miners carrying wicker baskets. Their backs are bent, their faces smudged, and their hands glisten with red dust. No masks, no ventilation, just raw contact with mercury ore. You can already feel the sting in your lungs, and you realize these men are sacrificing their bodies so emperors can sip a dream. The irony isn't lost on you: immortality for the powerful, shortened life for the ones digging it up. Historians still argue whether miners understood the dangers of cinnabar. Some suggest they saw it only as treasure, while others believe they noticed how men sickened and died young. Records mention miners coughing blood, trembling, or losing their teeth, symptoms we now recognize as mercury poisoning. But in a world where survival was already precarious, those risks might not have seemed unusual enough to stop. You brush your fingers along the cavern wall. The cinnabar dust clings to your skin, glowing faintly like ember ash. Beautiful, yes, but also deadly, a symbol of how often humans mistake danger for beauty. It's easy to see why alchemists adored it. Cinnabar resisted heat, transformed into mercury when roasted, and seemed to shimmer with the fire of life itself. In the distance, a foreman shouts, his voice echoing like thunder in the narrow tunnels. The miners swing their picks, striking sparks, each blow ringing like a bell tolling for unseen funerals. The torchlight flickers across the red walls, making the whole cavern look like it's bleeding. You take a step back, uneasy, realizing that every sparkle in the rock is a whisper of both promise and doom. And here's your mid-story joke, whispered through the dust: if you think glitter gets everywhere after a craft project, imagine cinnabar dust. No matter how much you scrub, you're glowing red for days. Not exactly the kind of shimmer you want to bring home. The baskets fill, the miners trudge upward, and outside the cave, the ore is roasted in clay furnaces. Thick smoke pours upward, shimmering silver as mercury drips out like liquid moonlight. You watch it pool in bowls, slippery and hypnotic, moving like it has a mind of its own. This quicksilver, gathered from the red rocks, will soon be bottled, mixed with gold powder, and poured into the emperor's cup. But the path from mine to palace isn't just a supply chain, it's a ritual. The materials are holy, dangerous, and sacred all at once. Every grain of cinnabar carries the weight of belief that life can be rewritten, that time can be bribed. As the furnaces hiss and crack, you step back into the night air. Your lungs ache with smoke, your clothes smell of stone and sulfur, and the stars above blur through the haze. You realize that the shimmer of gold in a cup starts with men coughing blood in the dark. And yet, No matter the cost, the obsession continues, because gold itself, eternal and untarnished, still whispers promises no mortal can ignore. You climb out of the mines, brushing the last flecks of red dust from your hands, and the night air feels cleaner, almost like a rebirth. Yet your eyes keep wandering back to that golden glimmer on the horizon, the metal that never rusts, never fades, never breaks. To the ancients, gold wasn't just shiny jewelry, it was a cosmic riddle. Why did it outlast fire, water, and time itself? If you wanted to cheat death, gold seemed like the obvious accomplice. One mainstream fact: in Chinese culture, gold symbolized purity, incorruptibility, and the sun's eternal glow. Unlike copper or iron, which tarnished and crumbled, gold stayed flawless. Temples and palaces gleamed with it, and emperors wrapped themselves in its symbolism. Drinking it wasn't just a medical experiment, it was an attempt to ingest permanence. Here's your quirky tidbit: ancient texts sometimes compared gold to the bones of the earth. The idea was that just as bones give structure to a body, gold gave structure to the world. To grind it up and swallow it was like strengthening your own skeleton with cosmic reinforcement. Forget calcium supplements, apparently. Powdered eternity was the original bone health plan. You sit beside a quiet stream under the moonlight, imagining a Daoist sage explaining it all. He picks up a pebble, dull and grey, and tosses it into the water where it vanishes without trace. Then he lifts a golden ornament from his sleeve, drops it in, and you watch as it glitters, unchanged, even against the current. "See," he murmurs, "the Tao favors what endures." To him, gold isn't just wealth, it's proof that some things can resist decay, just like the body longs to. Historians still argue whether gold's symbolism was imported from other cultures or born in China's soil. Some point to Mesopotamian and Egyptian traditions where gold also symbolized eternity, suggesting ideas may have traveled along early trade routes. Others argue that Chinese alchemists developed their own philosophy, seeing gold's untarnished quality as uniquely aligned with Daoist ideals. The debate lingers like a coin flipping endlessly in the air. As you walk through a bustling market, you notice how gold gleams on every level of society. Merchants weigh it carefully, craftsmen hammer it into thin sheets, and priests in temples polish statues until they shine like fire. Everyone wants a piece of it, even if only a sliver. But in the quiet corners, alchemists whisper that the true secret isn't wearing gold, it's consuming it. If the metal never dies, maybe your liver won't either. You pause, amused, at the thought. What would a modern nutrition label look like on a vial of powdered gold? Serving size: 1 eternity. Side effects: glowing intestines, possible death. Not exactly FDA approved, but certainly eye-catching. The symbolism of gold goes deeper than the physical. It links to yang, the bright, sunlit half of the yin-yang balance. Gold's shine was seen as condensed sunlight, and drinking it was like swallowing the rays of dawn. You imagine lying in bed at sunrise, sunlight spilling across your face, warm, radiant, timeless. Now imagine trying to capture that feeling in a cup. That was the lure. Back in the palace, emperors demanded not just wealth in gold but transformation through it. To gild statues was to honor the gods. To gild the body from the inside was to join them. The alchemists bowed, nodded, and ground their powders, all too aware that their patrons weren't asking politely, they were insisting. And so, the symbolism kept colliding with reality. Gold looked eternal, but human bodies didn't. No matter how much you swallowed, wrinkles still deepened, joints still ached, hearts still stopped. The dream was unshakable, though. The more fragile life felt, the brighter gold gleamed as the perfect lie. The moonlight fades as you turn from the stream, the sage's words still echoing in your ears. Gold doesn't tarnish, but the bodies chasing it do. And soon, you'll watch what happens when emperors and nobles learn this truth the hard way, when their sparkling brews turn lethal. You find yourself once again in a palace chamber, the walls painted with streaks of vermilion, the air heavy with incense. Courtiers gather in tense silence as a tray is carried in, upon it a cup glimmering with a faint metallic sheen. You already know the recipe by now: cinnabar, mercury, flecks of powdered gold, and you know what's about to happen. The emperor raises the cup, the court chants blessings, and the glittering liquid vanishes past his lips. For a heartbeat, all seems well. But you, watching quietly from the shadows, can sense the disaster brewing inside. One mainstream fact: records from the Tang dynasty describe multiple emperors dying suddenly after consuming alchemical elixirs. Emperor Wu Xing, for example, reportedly took elixirs in hopes of curing illness and prolonging his reign. Instead, he grew weaker and died at just 33. The very potions meant to grant immortality instead became the quickest route to the grave. Here's your quirky tidbit: some nobles tried to microdose immortality by adding tiny bits of gold leaf into their food or wine. Gold flakes floating in a cup of rice wine looked luxurious and supposedly nourished the body. It might sound oddly familiar, modern luxury cocktails sometimes still do the same thing. The difference is that today we do it for Instagram posts, not because we expect to live forever. The emperor coughs, at first softly, then more violently. His face flushes, sweat beads on his brow, and attendants rush forward with fans. The court forces smiles, insisting the purging is part of the transformation. You know better. These are the symptoms of mercury poisoning: tremors, delirium, collapse. But in the superstitious atmosphere of the palace, sickness could be spun as proof the elixir was working. After all, rebirth requires suffering, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether alchemists themselves believed these elixirs were safe, or if they knew the risks but couldn't admit it. Some texts hint at awareness, cautioning that too much of a potion could burn the body. Others are boldly confident, promising eternal youth. Perhaps the line between faith and fraud was as thin as a gold leaf floating on wine. You step closer, and the air thickens with dread. The emperor slumps in his seat, attendants whisper frantically, and the alchemist bows lower and lower, praying he won't be blamed. The irony is brutal. The most powerful man in the empire, surrounded by armies and riches, brought down not by rival swords but by a glittering sip. You remember the miners coughing in red dust, the sages murmuring about eternity, the emperors lifting jade cups like sacred chalices. All of it leads here to the quiet rattle of a poisoned breath. Immortality, it turns out, tastes a lot like defeat. And yet, the obsession never fades. Even after one ruler dies, the next ascends and demands the same shimmering draught. Perhaps he thinks his constitution is stronger, or that the recipe just needs a tweak. Perhaps he simply refuses to believe that death is inevitable. After all, when you command a kingdom, how hard can it be to command the body? Here's your soft chuckle for the night. If emperors had Yelp reviews for their alchemists, the comment section would be brutal. 2 stars. Potion killed me, but presentation was excellent. The chamber grows quiet as the emperor is carried away, his face pale against embroidered silk pillows. The courtiers disperse, murmuring, while the alchemist vanishes into shadows, either to escape punishment or to start boiling another batch. You're left with the bitter taste of irony. The elixirs designed to cheat death instead became an express ticket to it. Still, the story doesn't end in coughing halls and poisoned thrones. Out beyond the palace walls, some alchemists turned their gaze inward, deciding that maybe drinking metal wasn't the only path to eternity. Maybe the gold wasn't supposed to be swallowed at all. You slip away from the palace, leaving behind the echo of poisoned breaths and trembling servants. The air outside is cool, scented with pine needles, and the mountains stretch out like sleeping dragons. Here, away from the smoke of cauldrons, Daoist sages sit cross-legged on stone terraces, eyes closed, bodies still. No bronze pots, No shimmering vials, just silence, breath, and imagination. This is where the idea of drinking gold takes a very different turn. One mainstream fact: by the Tang and Song dynasties, Daoist traditions had already begun to shift emphasis from outer alchemy, with its dangerous brews, to inner alchemy, or Niden. Instead of swallowing metals, practitioners focused on meditation, breath control, and visualization, aiming to refine the body's energy into an immortal essence. It was safer, subtler, and in many ways more enduring. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Daoist manuals instructed adepts to imagine a golden pill forming inside their abdomen while they meditated. They were told to swallow this imaginary pill and circulate its light through the body. In other words, drinking gold became an act of imagination. You could conjure immortality in your own belly, no mercury poisoning required. Honestly, it sounds like the original version of guided meditation apps. You sit beside a sage who breathes slowly, each inhale long and smooth, each exhale whispering like wind through bamboo. His chest rises and falls, but his face glows as though lit from within. He doesn't need a cauldron because his body is the cauldron. His heart is the furnace, his breath the flame, his spirit the alchemist. Historians still argue whether inner alchemy was a direct evolution born from the failures of outer alchemy, or whether it had always existed alongside it, just less prominently recorded. Was it a plan B after too many emperors keeled over, or was it always the deeper meaning behind the metaphors? The ambiguity lingers like incense smoke, curling in both directions at once. The sage gestures for you to close your eyes. You breathe in the mountain air, crisp and pine-scented, and he whispers, "Imagine gold." In your mind's eye, a warm light gathers in your belly, glowing brighter with every breath. You feel lighter, as though time itself is flowing more slowly around you. It isn't about metal anymore, it's about energy, spirit, the sense that life can be polished like a coin until it gleams. You can't help but smile at the practicality of it all. No expensive ores, no suffocating mines, no deadly fumes. Just you, your lungs, and your imagination. If emperors had stuck to this version, maybe more dynasties would have lasted a little longer. Your joke for this section slips in softly. Imagine pitching inner alchemy to a court emperor. Good news, sire, immortality requires no gold, no mercury, no cauldrons. Just sit quietly for 30 minutes a day. You'd be executed before you finish the sentence. Because, let's be honest, quiet breathing doesn't look nearly as impressive as drinking molten sunlight in front of your entire court. But the sages didn't care about theatrics. Their immortality was about harmony, balancing yin and yang, refining spirit, becoming one with the Tao. To them, death wasn't a curse to outrun but a transformation to transcend. Inner alchemy promised not so much to keep your skin wrinkle-free but to keep your spirit unbroken, luminous, and part of the eternal flow. The mountain wind stirs your hair, carrying with it the soft clatter of bamboo chimes. You feel the contrast. In the palace, gold was power. Here in the mountains, gold is metaphor. And in that shift, the story of drinkable gold expands. It isn't always poison. Sometimes, it's poetry. You open your eyes, and the sage is gone, melted into the mist like he was never there. But his whisper lingers in your chest. The true elixir is already inside you. The mist thickens, and through it you glimpse the tiled rooftops of a city, where sharp-eyed officials are about to raise skeptical brows at all this golden nonsense. You leave the mountains behind, the sage's golden whisper fading, and wander down into the noise of a bustling capital city. Wooden carts rattle over stone streets, scholars in flowing robes hurry past with scrolls under their arms, and everywhere you hear the rhythm of debates. Because while emperors sip dangerous brews in candlelit halls, there are always sharp-eyed officials ready to roll their eyes at the whole thing. One mainstream fact: Confucian scholar officials often criticized alchemy, seeing it as wasteful, dangerous, and distracting from proper governance. For them, the emperor's duty wasn't to chase immortality but to rule with virtue, maintain rituals, and keep order in the realm. Court records show repeated petitions begging rulers to stop drinking immortal elixirs before they poisoned themselves. Spoiler: many of those petitions were politely ignored. Here's your quirky tidbit. One Tang Dynasty scholar quipped that if alchemists truly possessed the secret to eternal life, they wouldn't be hanging around begging for imperial stipends. Strange, he wrote, that men who live forever still need to eat 3 meals a day. A sarcastic burn from 1,200 years ago, proof that skepticism is timeless. You slip into a tea house where a group of officials sit around a wooden table, sipping green tea and whispering complaints. One adjusts his hat and mutters, "His Majesty drinks poison, yet calls it heaven's nectar." Another shakes his head. "We spend the treasury on cinnabar and gold, while roads crumble and soldiers starve." Their frustration simmers as hot as the tea in their cups. To them, alchemy isn't just foolish, it's dangerous misrule. Historians still argue whether these officials' criticisms ever truly mattered. Did emperors actually listen? Or did they tolerate skepticism as background noise, knowing they held the real power? Some chronicles suggest a few rulers were swayed, turning away from elixirs in their later years. Others doubled down, ignoring the pleas until their lips turned blue with mercury. You sit quietly in the corner, listening to the sarcasm flow like the tea. It's oddly comforting to hear bureaucrats being bureaucrats, fussing about budgets, health, and mismanagement. If you squint, it sounds almost modern. Imagine a government hearing today titled, "On the Fiscal Dangers of Swallowing Gold." You'd watch that live stream, admit it. The tea house fills with laughter as one scholar makes a joke at an alchemist's expense. "He promised to make my beard black again. Instead, he made my teeth fall out." The officials roar, but their humor hides real anxiety. After all, criticizing the emperor's obsession was risky business. Mocking alchemists was safer, they were the convenient scapegoats for failed potions. Outside, the city hums with everyday life. Farmers sell vegetables, artisans hammer bronze, children chase each other down alleyways. For them, immortality isn't a potion, it's hoping the harvest will last through winter. The contrast is sharp. You realize that while emperors gamble with gold, most people live day to day, their eternity measured in bowls of rice. Your light joke for this section: if Confucian officials had Yelp, every elixir would get 1 star. Would not recommend. Side effects include death and budget deficits. Yet the scholars' protests do add texture to the story. They remind you that not everyone was dazzled by shimmering cups. For every believer in the court, there was a skeptic with ink-stained sleeves, scribbling memos that warned, "Gold is not eternity, only illusion." The laughter in the tea house softens, replaced by the scratching of brushes on scrolls. Officials dip pens into ink, drafting yet another petition that may or may not reach imperial eyes. You watch them, steady and stubborn, guardians of practicality in a world of dangerous dreams. And as you step back into the street, the hum of the city gives way to another kind of hum, the tramp of caravans and the jingling of bells. The Silk Road waits, carrying with it strange powders, foreign tales, and new ingredients to stir into the alchemists' cauldrons. You follow the sound of bells and camel hooves along a dusty road stretching into the horizon. The Silk Road unfurls before you like a ribbon across deserts and mountains, carrying not just silk and spices but ideas, strange substances, whispered recipes, and exotic philosophies. If Chinese alchemists already had cinnabar and gold, now they were about to discover foreign powders to stir into their glittering brews. One mainstream fact: the Silk Road wasn't just for trade in goods, it was also a superhighway of ideas. Along its routes, Chinese alchemists encountered Indian, Persian, and even Hellenistic influences. Concepts like the philosopher's stone from Western alchemy occasionally crossed paths with Daoist dreams of immortality. The cauldron became a global melting pot long before chemistry labs existed. Here's your quirky tidbit. Travelers sometimes brought back not just minerals but animal oddities like powdered rhinoceros horn or crushed pearls, which found their way into certain elixir recipes. Imagine being told, "Yes, Majesty, this potion contains gold, silver, and, oh, a little bit of rhino." At that point, you're drinking something closer to a luxury smoothie than a medicine. You trudge beside a caravan, the air hot and dry, the camel's breath steaming in the cool of dawn. The traders gossip in a dozen languages, flashing silver coins and vials of colored powders. Some claim their goods are blessed by desert spirits, others that they come straight from the heavens. You can almost hear the alchemists salivating back home, eager to dump every exotic thing into their cauldrons. Historians still argue how much foreign influence truly reshaped Chinese alchemy. Did Persian texts and Indian Ayurvedic traditions deeply impact the recipes, or were Chinese alchemists already marching down similar paths on their own? Some say the exchange was profound, others insist the overlaps are coincidence, a case of humans everywhere sharing the same dream of escaping death. The debate continues, dusty as the caravan trail itself. You stop at a market town along the road, where stalls overflow with lapis lazuli, frankincense, and mysterious crystals glowing faintly in the torchlight. An alchemist squats beside a merchant, bargaining fiercely for a pouch of something called dragon's tears, which, spoiler, turns out to be just imported salt. Even so, the myth makes it irresistible. Your joke for this section sneaks in here. If Amazon Prime had existed back then, emperors would have had elixirs arriving every 2 days. Your package of immortality powder has been delivered. And of course, half of it would still be mislabeled. As night falls, you sit by a campfire with merchants and monks. They share stories of distant lands where sages also drink mysterious brews, where mountains hide herbs that make men live 1,000 years, where gems can heal the sick. Each tale fans the fire of imagination, and you realize the alchemists back home didn't just inherit recipes, they inherited a global storytelling tradition. To drink gold wasn't just Chinese ambition, it was part of a human hunger stretching across continents. You close your eyes, hearing the rustle of silk, the creak of saddles, the soft hiss of wind over sand. The road winds on, carrying these strange ingredients toward Chinese cauldrons. Soon, workshops will glow again with fire, but now the recipes will be even more elaborate, more ambitious, almost laboratories before their time. The caravan bells fade, replaced by the clanging of hammers on bronze and the hiss of molten metal. You're about to step into the laboratories of alchemists who, without meaning to, laid the stepping stones for chemistry itself. You walk into a narrow courtyard where smoke rises from brick chimneys, and the scent of heated metal stings your nose. No longer are you in the desert marketplace, haggling for dragon's tears. Here, the alchemists are busy in what looks suspiciously like an early science lab. Bronze cauldrons bubble, glass vessels shimmer with steam, and powders lie neatly labeled in clay jars. You can almost hear the clatter of modern chemistry sneaking into history. One mainstream fact: many historians credit Daoist alchemists with accidental scientific discoveries. In their quest for immortality, they experimented with distillation, sublimation, and the refining of minerals. Their techniques weren't systematic in the modern sense, but they laid groundwork later picked up by Chinese medicine, metallurgy, and even gunpowder. Yes, your fireworks on New Year's Eve have roots in someone's failed elixir recipe. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some manuals describe a substance called mock gold created through clever heating of minerals. It looked like real gold, glittered like real gold, but wasn't basically the ancient version of fake jewelry you buy at a night market. Alchemists sometimes convinced rulers that this glittering fool's gold was proof their experiments were working. Imagine the emperor clapping proudly while unknowingly funding the world's first knockoff industry. You lean over a workbench where a young apprentice grinds minerals into powder. His master stirs a cauldron, muttering formulas under his breath, symbols scrawled on the walls in chalk. You recognize retorts, bellows, crucibles. The whole setup feels weirdly familiar. If you swapped the robes for lab coats and added safety goggles, you could almost convince yourself you were in a modern chemistry class. Except here, the final exam involves drinking mercury. Good luck passing that one. Historians still argue whether these workshops should be considered proto-science or just mystical tinkering. Was the alchemist a scientist in disguise, or merely a dreamer with better tools? Some argue that their careful documentation of methods was undeniably scientific. Others counter that their goals, immortality, divine union, kept them trapped in mysticism. The debate lingers, as cloudy as the fumes in this smoky lab. You watch as one alchemist pours liquid from a heated vessel into another, steam curling like dragon's breath. "See," he says proudly, "the spirit of gold is release." To him, vapor isn't just condensation, it's proof of a soul hiding within matter. That blend of observation and imagination is both brilliant and dangerous. Your joke for this section comes with a smirk. If alchemists had peer review, half their journals would be titled Results Inconclusive, Emperor Dead. Not exactly the kind of paper you'd want published in Nature. But despite the mishaps, the alchemists stumbled into discoveries. They refined salts, purified minerals, and uncovered reactions that shaped medicine and industry. Their cauldrons were mistakes waiting to happen, yes, but they were also laboratories of curiosity. Every puff of smoke carried a lesson, even if the lesson was maybe don't drink that. The workshop glows in the firelight, tools clinking, apprentices running with armfuls of charcoal. You step back, realizing that even though these men chased immortality, they left behind something almost better, knowledge. Not eternal life, but eternal curiosity. The hiss of fire dies into silence, and the smoke swirls upward, twisting into the shape of shimmering figures. You blink, and suddenly you're surrounded not by apprentices but by legends, immortals with golden palaces and stories as dazzling as the potions they drank. The smoke clears, and you find yourself drifting into a world where logic softens and myths reign. Palaces of jade shimmer in the clouds, and elegant figures glide past, their robes sparkling with a dusting of gold. These are the immortals of Chinese legend, the shimmering beings who supposedly drank elixirs and then slipped away from earthly ties to live forever among the stars. One mainstream fact: Daoist literature is full of tales about these Yan immortals who achieved transcendence through meditation, rituals, or yes, the drinking of magical elixirs. They were said to live in paradisiacal lands like Mount Penglai, a mystical island of abundance where peaches of immortality grew. For alchemists and emperors alike, these stories were fuel, proof that eternal life wasn't just fantasy but something others had already achieved. Here's your quirky tidbit. One famous legend tells of an immortal who, after drinking his elixir, floated up into the sky while playing a flute, completely ignoring the laws of gravity. Imagine being his neighbor, watching him drift off mid-concert like a helium balloon, flute music fading as he disappears into the clouds. Romantic? Sure. Weird? Absolutely. You wander through a luminous garden where peaches glow softly on the branches. A kindly immortal gestures for you to sit by a pond shimmering with golden ripples. "Drink," he says, offering a cup. You hesitate after all. By now you've seen enough emperors keel over from similar offers. But here, in legend, the liquid tastes like sunlight and honey, no poison in sight. Historians still argue whether these tales were meant as literal proof of success or symbolic encouragement. Did people really believe flute-playing immortals zoomed into the sky, or did they see these stories as allegories for spiritual freedom? The lines blur, as myth often mingles with faith. Some emperors clearly leaned toward taking them literally, while many scholars treated them as moral lessons wrapped in sparkle. In a corner of the shimmering garden, you overhear a group of immortals gossiping. So-and-so claimed he lived 500 years, one chuckles. Please, I saw him last week, looked tired after 50. Even in heaven, it seems, no one's safe from a little side-eye. Your light joke here. Imagine the immortals trying to form a sports league, centuries-old players, all arguing about the rules. Back in my day, one insists, we didn't even have gravity. Yet these legends had weight. They gave people hope that suffering and sickness weren't the end of the story. If gold could transform into liquid life, maybe the world itself wasn't as solid and finite as it seemed. The shimmering palaces weren't just backdrops, they were promises, glittering goals for those willing to risk everything. The immortals fade into mist, their laughter and music drifting like a lullaby. You feel the ground beneath you solidify again, the glow of palaces replaced by the dim light of candles on a desk. Scrolls spread across the table, riddled with strange symbols. You realize you've landed in another realm of mystery, alchemy's hidden codes, the cryptic language that turned recipes into riddles. You lean closer to the desk, candlelight flickering over parchment filled with symbols that look half like recipes and half like poetry. The alchemists didn't just boil metals, they wrote about their work in riddles, cloaking their instructions with layers of metaphor. To an outsider, the text might read like a dream sequence. When the dragon swallows the pearl, the golden water flows. Sounds more like bedtime poetry than step-by-step chemistry. One mainstream fact: many Daoist alchemical texts were deliberately coded. Ingredients were disguised under symbolic names. Cinnabar could be called the vermilion bird, mercury might be the flowing dragon, and gold sometimes the yellow essence. This wasn't just for secrecy, it was also a reflection of how they saw the world, where every substance had a cosmic identity. Your quirky tidbit: some manuals even included red herrings, false instructions meant to confuse unworthy readers. Imagine opening a recipe and reading, Step 3, add unicorn sweat. Good luck brewing that one. In some cases, these deliberate misdirections probably saved lives, preventing amateurs from copying lethal mixtures. Though, of course, the dedicated still found ways to poison themselves anyway. You trace the curling brushstrokes of a character, noticing how it might mean fire in one context and inner spirit in another. The texts danced between physical alchemy and spiritual symbolism. Was drinking gold always literal? Or was it sometimes about cultivating an inner state of radiance, a metaphor for purifying the soul? Historians still argue whether entire traditions of alchemy were actually metaphorical practices disguised in chemical language or the other way around. You imagine a frustrated apprentice, squinting at his master's scroll. Wait, does this mean actual dragon or just mercury again? The joke practically writes itself. Alchemy was like the world's worst IKEA manual, full of symbols, zero clarity, and if you misread one line, you end up with a pile of wood or, in this case, an accidental explosion. Yet these riddles weren't nonsense. They reflected a worldview where everything connected. Metals mirrored planets, bodily organs echoed natural elements, and the written word itself pulsed with cosmic energy. Decoding the recipe wasn't just about making a potion, it was about aligning your mind with the hidden rhythms of the universe. The longer you stare at the scrolls, the more the words seem to shimmer. They almost whisper, tugging you deeper into mystery. You sense that each phrase carries a double meaning, one for the body and one for the spirit. And so you realize, drinking gold could mean sipping a glittering elixir, or it could mean cultivating an inner light so strong that your spirit itself shone like gold. The candles gutter low, and the ink on the parchment seems to ripple like water. The cryptic formulas fade, transforming into something more familiar: medicine jars, herbal shops, and healers prescribing powders. The story is shifting again, from hidden codes to how golden dreams filtered into real medical practices. You blink, and now you're standing in a bustling apothecary. Wooden shelves creak under the weight of porcelain jars labeled with elegant calligraphy. The air smells of dried ginseng, licorice root, and faintly metallic powders. Somewhere behind the counter, a mortar crunches as an herbalist grinds medicine, while patients wait with slips of paper prescribing mixtures for coughs, fevers, or something a bit more ambitious, longevity. One mainstream fact: traditional Chinese medicine often absorbed bits of alchemical thought. Minerals such as realgar, cinnabar, and yes, gold were used in small, carefully prepared doses as remedies for various ailments. Though the mystical immortality quest waned, the idea that substances carried healing energies endured, blending with herbal practices that are still alive today. Your quirky tidbit: some old records mention edible gold leaf being used as a tonic for vitality. That's right, luxury cuisine isn't just a modern invention. Imagine sipping soup with a sprinkle of gold flakes floating on top, a kind of Instagrammable elixir centuries before social media. Of course, unlike mercury, gold in this form was relatively harmless, just flashy enough to make you feel rich even if you weren't getting immortal. You watch as a weary scholar explains his prescription to the herbalist: a blend of ginseng for stamina, cinnamon for warmth, and just a speck of processed cinnabar to calm the spirit. The mix gets wrapped in paper, tied with string, and handed off to boil into a tea. It's striking how the boundary between medicine and alchemy blurs. Was this healing, or was it a diluted echo of the old immortality brews? Historians still argue whether these medical uses of minerals were more influenced by alchemy's spiritual legacy or by practical observation of effects. Did doctors really believe gold soothed the body's qi, or was it more about the prestige of prescribing something precious? The debate hangs unresolved, like incense smoke curling in the rafters. Your joke for this section slips in when you picture an ancient patient grumbling: "Doc, I came in for a cough, and you gave me powdered gemstones. Are you sure this isn't just your side hustle as a jeweler?" Still, medicine adapted. The disastrous overdoses of emperors gradually gave way to cautious use in clinics, where healers tried to balance the allure of precious minerals with real care for the body. The dream of immortality never quite died, but it became practical, about longevity, vitality, and easing suffering. Drinking gold went from a death wish to a therapeutic sprinkle, something closer to a luxury spice than a life-altering gamble. You run your fingers over the smooth porcelain jars, the characters inked in neat black strokes. Behind you, the chatter of the apothecary fades, and a quieter hum fills the air. It's the sound of pens scratching, books compiling, knowledge being preserved. From medicines and myths to experiments and disasters, all of it is drifting into scrolls that will outlast both emperors and elixirs. The legacy of gold is about to crystallize in history itself. You step into a hall lined with shelves that stretch into shadow, scrolls stacked high, bamboo slips tied with cord, and books bound in silk. The faint smell of ink and parchment replaces the tang of herbs and metal. Here, alchemy is no longer smoke and fire, it is memory. Every experiment, every failure, every shimmering dream of immortality is preserved in words, waiting for the next curious mind. One mainstream fact: the great compendiums of Chinese history, like Baopuzi by Ji Hong, carefully recorded alchemical theories alongside practical medicine, philosophy, and spiritual practice. Ji Hong himself admitted he had never successfully achieved immortality, but he believed it was possible, and his writings kept the dream alive for centuries. By recording both recipes and warnings, he ensured that the strange pursuit of drinking gold didn't vanish with its victims. Your quirky tidbit: some scribes reportedly grew paranoid about copying dangerous elixir formulas word for word. They would intentionally forget a crucial line or swap an ingredient, almost like ancient redaction. Imagine passing down a recipe for cookies but leaving out the sugar, ensuring nobody actually enjoys them. Only in this case, the omission might save a dynasty from keeling over after dessert. You wander between the shelves, the hush of history almost lulling you. The idea of drinking gold, once so fiery and alive in workshops and palaces, now rests in ink and paper. Scholars debate it, emperors haunt its memory, but here the pursuit has transformed into legacy, part cautionary tale, part stepping stone toward modern science. Historians still argue whether this preservation was about honoring wisdom or simply archiving failure, but the debate itself shows how enduring the fascination remains. And now, as you stand among the books, you notice the glow of candles dimming, the echoes of past experiments fading. It is time to close the scroll, to let the story rest, and to drift toward your own quiet immortality, sleep. The fire in the brazier softens to a warm ember, and the voices of emperors, alchemists, and immortals dissolve into a gentle hush. The jars of powders and shimmering cups of liquid fade from sight, replaced by nothing more than the steady rhythm of your own breathing. Each inhale draws in calm, each exhale lets go of noise. The scrolls around you slowly blur, their characters melting into patterns that no longer demand to be read. What was once a code, a riddle of immortality, now feels like a soft lullaby written across parchment. The halls grow wider, quieter, filled not with ambition or fear but with stillness. You might picture the alchemists at rest, no longer chasing golden vapors, but sleeping peacefully under the stars. The emperors, too, no longer reaching for eternal life, but simply letting the night cradle them. Even the immortals, once so dazzling, seem to lean back on the clouds and close their eyes. In the end, the greatest elixir was always this rest, renewal, the quiet gift of night. Let your thoughts drift the way smoke curls upward, thin and light, disappearing into the vastness. Imagine golden light not as a potion to swallow, but as a soft glow surrounding you, wrapping you in safety. There is nothing more to reach for, no secrets left to decode, no fires left to tend. Only calm, only quiet, only sleep. So let your body sink deeper into comfort, your breath slower, your mind lighter. The quest is finished, the story is complete. What the alchemists could not find in their cups of gold, you can find now, in this moment of stillness.